Hey guys, and welcome to or back to the Paws in Pursuit podcast with your host, Ant Clarke. So today we finally have another guest on. We're going to have Ant Clarke on the podcast, and we're going to be talking all about British Agility Championships, Open Junior Agility Championships, and Ant's career coaching the YKC Team GB. So without further ado, let's get into the conversation.
So I'm Ant Clarke. I am the Great Britain YKC Junior Agility Coach and the Director of British Agility.
Cool. So the first question someone asked is, how did you first enter the world of agility, and how old were you when you did so?
So I was 5 years old when I was sat on the sofa at home with my parents watching Crufts, and I remember seeing agility come on the TV and kind of saying, that's something I want to do.
Wow, that's very young.
My dad was sort of highly involved in the training of gun dogs, and my mum was involved in the world as well. So there was always a very strong kind of canine relationship within the family. So when I finally saw it and thought that looks exciting, and I was quite sort of sporty myself anyway, It was one of those things that I kind of nagged my parents to allow me to try and do it.
Did you have family dogs then? Did your parents have dogs that they did the gun dog stuff with?
Yeah, so my dad had 2 Labradors and 2 Springers. So I kind of ended up playing around in the garden with them a little bit. And then for my 6th birthday, they bought me my own Jack Russell. And then I went to basic puppy classes and an agility class, and then it kind of just took off from there.
Oh, wow, yeah. Similar to me then, but I was 8 when I got my first dog. And it always starts with the obedience, doesn't it? And then you kind of find out about the rest of it.
I actually think that's one thing that's lacking a little bit in these days is people get a dog and then they go straight into agility classes and they don't have that kind of relationship and the basic control in place before they do it.
Yeah, I think that's a big issue with like dogs running out the ring as well.
Absolutely.
That foundation isn't there. So my first dog was definitely the most well-behaved for that reason. I did the most obedience with him, whereas the others I kind of just went straight into the agility. But
yeah, I think the trend now has gone away from kind of like the dog training side of things.
Yeah.
And it's gone more to, I get a dog, I'm going to do agility straight away. I know obviously there's a certain amount of obedience involved in it, but things like the basic puppy classes, whether it's related to agility or not, I think it was something a few years back, especially when I first started, it was kind of seen that you needed to have done that before. And there were several clubs I know in the area that didn't allow you, especially as a junior or a young handler, to actually go into agility classes until you could prove you had full control of your own dog.
Yeah, well, the first agility club I tried to start with my first dog rejected me I literally turned up and they said, no, you're too young.
Fair enough. Yeah.
So that's one way, but
I think that's developed over the last few years, and seeing younger people get involved with dog sports and dog training a lot more regularly. But I also think now that it's something that probably should be introduced a little bit, maybe not to a full extent of that, but some kind of engagement /relationship building / basic training before you go into a club.
Yeah, and it'd help with like safety as well of dogs. It'd stop dogs running into the ring and fighting with other dogs and stuff. So yeah, 100%.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So number 2 is, were there many international opportunities for juniors when you were a YKC member? So obviously, because you started so young, you were in with the YKC. Did you go abroad, or is that sort of more a recent thing that's come about?
When I first started in the YKC, there was nothing really there. I was lucky enough, after being successful at Crufts, that the Kennel Club and the YKC actually invited me to go to the first Junior World Championships that Great Britain would represent. And that was in 2007 in Belgium. Oh, okay. So I was lucky enough to be kind of sponsored by the YKC and the Kennel Club to be able to go out and compete at that, which was great. And I was lucky enough to do well out there as well, so that was great. And then it was kind of one of those things, and we ended up kind of then talking about it with the YKC and the Kennel Club after that. And it's kind of where I think the development of my own OJAC event came from. And also then further down the line, the YKC decided to start sending teams abroad, which I think is only ever going to now improve.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think it was Slovakia was like the first year. I think the year before I first went on Team GB, there was Slovakia, and then the year I went was the second year. So it was fairly new then, and that, what was that, like 7 years ago? So not even that long ago.
Yeah.
Was what you did?
I think that agility for sort of young handlers throughout the whole world is on the up.
Yeah.
And I think the thing is now is the attendance at the YKC last year when we were in Finland was great. And obviously this year being in England, I know it's a bit more difficult for handlers and competitors in countries to be able to get over to the UK at the moment. But I believe that there's a fair few teams coming. I've spoke to a couple of countries that are going to be making the journey here. So that's going to be great. So fingers crossed, it's just one of those things that's going to continue to develop and move forward.
Is this year that it's in the UK, isn't it? The juniors?
Yeah.
So was the one that you did, you said Junior World Championship. So was that more of a WAO thing than an EO thing? Because now it's obviously like an EO thing, isn't it?
Yeah, so in 2007 there was competitors all through Europe, but there was also, I believe USA had one competitor, and I can't remember where else it was. It may have been Canada, I think, had a competitor there as well. But again, it was more along the lines of you had an invite from those countries, from your kennel club to come across.
Oh, I see.
So
okay.
when I received the invite from the kennel club to kind of sponsor me to go across there, it was kind of a huge honour at that age, and also something that I was really keen to get out there and do well in.
Yeah, definitely. It's very exciting. I remember the first tryouts I did, I didn't even know there was an abroad trip. And then after the tryouts, it was, I think, Mark at the time, he told all the parents what it would involve. And we were like, oh, didn't know that. Just thought it was a normal competition. And then the rest is history. So no, it is amazing. That's crazy though. You say the USA had one competitor. Like thinking of how big the teams are now, just having like one person go out there is crazy.
Yeah, I know last year they had a fairly big team go out to Finland. And I know from just looking on social media, they've got another big team coming this year. So I think that's kind of what we're seeing is the teams are starting to grow and everything's starting to get bigger. This year with our qualifier for Team GB in the UK, and with the event being in the UK, we had a huge amount of entries for the tryout. Obviously through the PSQ and that people had already qualified, but the Open Showcase was one of the biggest ones we've had. So I think there's a lot more depth now to look into. And as a management team, speaking with Greg and the rest of the team, we've said that there's a lot more to pull from and to pick from, which again, long term with the training and the development, hopefully going forward, is only going to now progress the junior team going forward into the adults in a few years' time.
Yeah, that's really cool, especially with the Open Showcase. Like, it's good for young dogs. Obviously, I tried out with Arrow, just for more experience. So it's good that you can do that, sort of not thinking you'll get on the team, just sort of practice the courses and stuff like that. So that's really cool.
Yeah, I think it opens up a completely different dynamic.
Yes.
And the dogs that are good enough at that point will then move forward. But it kind of gives everybody that opportunity, and it also gives management and people that we may not have seen previously the opportunity to showcase what they might have, whether they're in a completely different demographic for us, or their direction of training or events they go to are completely different to maybe what we see.
Yes.
So it's a good weekend to be able to get everybody in sort of one place and showcase what we've got, and then obviously with the good dogs, they will then travel forward. And then if they're not quite ready, then they've got the opportunity next year, and then throughout the whole year's process of other opportunities to be able to qualify for the PSQ as well.
Yeah, cool. So the next one is, did you experience any training difficulties when you were a YKC member? So I saw this question, I didn't really understand it, but I think what they meant was sort of, were there any specific things you struggled with when you were training your dogs when you were a junior, if that makes sense?
I wouldn't say there was too many struggles. Obviously, being a younger handler, I was very keen to just kind of get out and get it done, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%.
I was already very determined to kind of just train the dog and compete. And I love that thought of kind of getting to that competition and doing well.
Yeah.
So I was very driven by that. I think one of the things that I would say, that speaking with a lot of different handlers and sort of like seeing them develop, is sometimes adults don't take the juniors seriously.
Yes,
And I felt that was a massive thing for me. And I also felt that when I did well, a lot of the adults didn't quite like that. So that whole start sort of competing, going through the grades at the time, sort of like the elementary, the starter, the novice, building through. I actually think what it did was it allowed me to build sort of friendships with adults on the way through, but also have people that maybe not were jealous, that's probably not the right word, but also they found it annoying that a younger handler was doing well.
It makes I think it makes them feel worse about themselves as a handler, thinking that someone that age can do it better almost sometimes. But I know what maybe. You mean.
And I know a few handlers have had that same conversation with me, like with the Team GB stuff. What we end up doing is we have a parent and handler sort of like interview, meet the management type thing on one of the first training days. And we ask them sort of questions, and people have said that they feel sometimes because they've done well, other people are jealous of that. And in sort of like today's sort of conversations on social media and different things like that, sometimes they can feel a bit alienated. I'm quite a hard-nosed person in a sense, so people giving me stick or kind of becoming very vocal about how they might feel about me doing well or me doing something, I kind of just take it on the chin and move on. But I can see where some young handlers might feel pressure from social media and other factors. So that could be a struggle, but at that time, I don't think it really affected me as an individual.
Did you find that there were other juniors, or, were you one of the only juniors at that point doing agility? Or, did you have the juniors like there is today, sort of, maybe running parents' dogs or running dogs that are already trained, while you're trying to train your own dog? Because that's definitely something that I had. So I obviously only did local shows to start with, and I was the only junior. They were all adults, so I made friends with the adults. The judges would see me, the only junior, and give me like judges special, stuff like that. And then I'd go further afield, and there'd be like a few more juniors, but most of them were running other dogs that they hadn't trained. Did you have that sort of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. It was always kind of like a bit of a pet peeve of mine, if I'm honest. Going in and you put the hours in and you work and you train the dog, you have the investment of time, effort and money from your parents taking you around the country, and then someone would randomly turn up and then get handed a dog, and the dog would be at a much higher level to maybe my own dog at that time. And the handler didn't really know the dog, and they would fly around the course and sometimes end up beating you. And in my head, it used to irritate me, but it kind of made me want to train harder.
True.
And actually, I think one of the things in which the Kennel Club tried to, or the YKC tried to divide it, was that a few years back, I can't remember the exact date of it or year, but they actually had a class which was called Own Trained Dog.
Oh, really?
So basically it had to be, and it was a qualifier for Crufts, and you could go there. And I remember I won that the first year. And then that was the same year, so it must have been 2006, I believe. And I think that was the year I won my second year of Agility Dog of the Year. And a couple of the people that ran other people's dog got frustrated that we had another option or another competition.
True,
So there was There's little
two
bit
sides,
of
I suppose, but
it was their option of people started to get a little bit irritated, so that disappeared quickly.
I want them to bring that back.
So it was one of those things. I know obviously the YKC are trying to develop and trying to move things forward, and I think now where the junior YKC agility side of things are, I think is moving in the correct direction.
100%. So now we're going to talk more about BAC and OJAC. So what inspired BAC and OJAC, and what made you want to run these events? So obviously you have both these events now.
So after being at the Junior World Championships in 2007, I wanted something to come back and kind of try and replicate the same concept. We didn't really have anything here. We had Agility Dog of the Year at Crufts and all that stuff, and YKC Camp, but there was nothing that really focused, I would say, on junior agility moving forward. And obviously in my experience out there, it was a completely different mentality. Pressure, competition, the layout of the rings, all that sort of stuff.
100%.
And I wanted to bring that back here. So that was when I came up with the idea of creating OJAC, basically. And it was a big success straight away. We had foreign competitors come over and compete. We had all sorts of different demographics moving into the area to try and be ready for that weekend, which was great. And it kind of had the correct mentality. There was a very friendly feel, but there was also that competitive feel as well. Yeah. And that was something I wanted to try and create. Having the individual events as well as the team events. So it gave a little bit of a different dynamic whilst at that weekend.
Yes.
At the time, there was a lot of the adults being able to run team events and qualify for sort of like the pedigree team events and all those sorts of things. But there was nothing, again, for the juniors at that moment. So bringing that forward was great fun and actually targeting a whole weekend just for the kids.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
And being able to really push that forward. And the feedback I had, and each year we developed and changed a couple of things depending on really how I felt the international agility scene was going, and tried to bring that into it. So in a sense, it was preparing some of the kids that were going to move on to the Team GB stuff or was going to go off and try and push to get onto maybe qualifying for Olympia or different Crufts events or whatever it may be. So adding a little bit more of a focus to that was my main aim for that.
Where
and then in relation to British Agility, it was again a very similar idea, but I wanted there to be a bit of a tournament feel.
Okay,
and I think that's something where in other countries they have sort of like tournaments over a weekend or tournaments over a couple of weekends, and we didn't really have that here. So what I wanted to try and do was create a cumulative result over so many runs, which got you into a final, which then put the pressure on in the final. So instead of it just being like your normal CC and moving forward and then getting into the final, I wanted that to be over, say, 4 or 5 runs.
Yeah.
So it give people that option and then dividing that up. So we had sort of like the higher grades and the lower grades. It give the same concept. And again, over the last must be 9 years now, British Agility has been running. We've changed that slightly. So now we're looking at, again, what other things we can bring into it. So the winner of a round now qualifies you directly, gives you your bye straight into the final. But then it's the cumulative over the other positions to be able to get in. And then having a monetary reward. So many of us travel all around the country week in, week out for a rosette. And I think one of the things that will help push agility forward, it's not always about prize money, but I think it's about giving back a little bit to the competitor. The way the world is at the minute, everything's got more expensive and people are sort of having to pick and choose what events they're going to go to, or are they going to go training instead of a show or whatever it might be. So even if it was just winning a small amount of money back, I think it gave people the option. And I was lucky enough to have sponsors that were involved that were willing to put forward prize money. So the first year, it was £400 for the winner. Okay. And then it just sort of like cut down from there to the top 3. And then the same for the novice, there was, I think it was £150 or £200 for the winner. And then it cut down, and it just gives people a little bit more of an incentive to try and do these tournament classes, and gives them a slightly different approach to it. And then again, having it in a very, what I would class it as, fair and level environment, instead of it being just sort of like in a muddy field potentially. One day it was dry, the next day is going to be wet and muddy and churned up. We've kept it on sort of like an indoor sand surface. And what that's done, I think, is it allows us to prepare the surface as consistently as we can. So everybody is on the same playing field. Keep the equipment, keep the organisation, keep the whole concept as consistent as we possibly can. So everyone is on that level playing field to be able to compete.
Yeah, which is great because you don't have to, like the week before, you don't have to worry if it's raining about not being able to go to your show at the weekend, because, you know, you're going to be able to no matter what.
Agree.
And I think I have been to a few, there's been a few BACs, hasn't there, where it has been raining. But obviously it doesn't matter because it's inside. But as well, like having it...
Yeah, it definitely helps. And I think it allows people to actually enjoy it, because sometimes in a sense where if you're at a normal show, you could be completely soaking wet, so you sit in the car for the rest of the weekend.
Yeah,
in a sense, and then you come out, you do your run, and then you disappear again. So you lose that little bit of kind of competitive edge.
Yes,
whereas
definitely.
having this, people come in, they're around the ring, they're there, they're kind of socialising, and it keeps that little bit more of an atmosphere going.
Yeah. Another thing I think probably helps is, like you said, having the tournament aspect. So, one run is one day, and then the next day, and then the final's the final day. So you kind of have to do the whole event instead of like a normal show. People just do one of the days or whatever. So it is really it's more collective. Like everyone's there for the whole thing.
Yeah, and I think that's again something that is very different abroad to being in the UK. We've got so many shows around the country each weekend here. I looked at the calendar a few weekends ago, and I think across the whole of the UK, I think there was like 17 shows across however many organisations. And I'm like, the pull of people going to each event is obviously going to become smaller. So numbers may drop in situations like that. So being able to try and keep people consistently on maybe one site for the weekend. Yes, it's not going to stop other shows running, but it allows people to have a bit of a base for that weekend and enjoy the whole process instead of it just being right, Saturday I'm here, Sunday I'm here, Monday I'm travelling back to do this or whatever. So
I think that's crazy doing like one show one day and then going to a different one on the Sunday. Like it's a lot.
Yeah. But I think over the years it's definitely grown and it's increasing, same as OJAC. And I think now there's a few other tournament type events that happen here in the UK. So I think actually, if we look at where our show should be going, I think it should be going more that direction. Personally, but.
Is BAC the only? Because it's the only show I can think of that offers prize money for like the finals. Is it the only one that offers prize money in the UK? I can't think of any others that I've been to.
I know there's been some classes and other organisations that have given prize money, yes, but I don't think it's the size of the prize money. I think is definitely one of the biggest that's there. I think they sort of give the class entry or say 10, 20 quid back. But actually knowing what you're going to win if you are the overall champion when you first initially turn up, I think is one of the bigger and sort of like first to do that.
Yeah. And another thing with like, I'm at the point with agility now as well, that everything is so much more expensive that sort of you have to choose, like you said, choose quite wisely which shows you actually pay for. And then obviously petrol's gone up as well. So the money's definitely a good incentive. And then
I think so.
Trying to be a show that's one that people prioritise because, they're not going to do all of them.
Yeah, and I think now the way in which clubs and organisations are going to help people want to keep coming back to the shows is by giving some kind of prize money or an incentive or free entry to the following year or whatever it is. So people actually have that incentive instead of it just potentially being a rosette or a trophy or whatever.
With OJAC then, just quickly back to that, do you reckon that, part of the appeal for juniors was a lot of juniors would probably go to normal shows and sort of feel a bit intimidated by, competing against the adults, especially, once you get to, say, grade 5 to 7, even I know now, like going up with Arrow, you get into the top grades and there's kind of a bit of sort of imposter syndrome. You think, oh God, look at the people I'm competing against. Do you know what I mean? In the same classes as. Do you think that helps, them thinking, I can go to this show and there'll be, other juniors, people like me, and, they won't feel quite as intimidated or worried to compete?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a big factor for a lot of them, especially if they're maybe new into the sport or they're at a slightly smaller club, so they don't know some of the bigger names in the sport, or they've heard the names and then they turn up to a show and all of a sudden that person stood in the queue next to them.
Yeah.
It can be quite intimidating. So knowing that they might be able to go to a show and everyone's in their same age groups or brackets or whatever it is, and allowing them to, in a way, form friendships and groups and actually get to know people. So when they go to those more intimidating shows, they've got people they know.
Yeah, definitely.
And I know especially for some of the younger handlers, they have now got friends that are older that have been at the junior shows.
Yeah.
And then you see them forming sort of groups and friendship groups at the shows. And just with the GB stuff here, what we've done recently is by getting people to communicate across different age groups and train and socialise together, is creating more of a junior unit instead of it just being a this and them type thing.
Yeah. Definitely. Well, I have more friends from junior agility than in my own hometown, so that's definitely worked for me. So would you ever consider opening OJAC up to 18 to 21-year-olds? So more specifically for those who missed out on their final years as a junior, in COVID year and stuff like that. So would you ever consider doing that? Because I know at the moment it's, once you turn 18, you're too old for it.
Yeah, so we did a few years back. We looked at the analysis of where juniors were and what age groups and brackets and stuff we were in. And obviously with the YKC, they've got it up to the 18 to 24.
Yeah, it's 24, isn't it? Yeah.
And I played with the idea for, I think it may have been 2 years. We did it at OJAC where we actually opened it up a little bit more. Mm-hmm. But I didn't feel that it actually promoted what I wanted to try and achieve.
Yeah.
In my eyes, you've got OJAC there up until the year of being 19, and then you move into British Agility, was my idea.
Yes, yeah, that makes sense.
So by opening it up, what I was doing was kind of bringing so many back, potentially from British Agility, back into that junior bit. There wasn't that stepping stone.
Yeah.
So I personally think that the 18 to 24 bracket should be reviewed, if I'm honest. Mm-hmm. And it's something that I feel that when you get to being 18, you now move into that next bracket.
Yeah.
And you're into that next competitive part of your career. Mm-hmm. So I think actually holding them back in a junior setup, for me, long term will be detrimental.
Yeah.
So my idea was obviously having OJAC from 5 up to 18. Mm-hmm. And then from that bracket, you then go into British Agility. Of course, juniors can compete at British Agility, and there is a junior class coming forward, which we've run. And also this year, it's a qualification for the World Agility Open junior selection.
Oh, okay, cool.
So there's another kind of like connection through there,
yeah.
Which again is another movement forward in the production, and the development of what we're trying to achieve with the juniors.
I agree with that, to be fair, because in a sense, once you're 18, you are an adult, and also you've kind of got to think, if OJAC starts at 5 years old, then a 5-year-old and a 24-year-old is like, is that even juniors anymore? Do you get what I mean? When you get to 24, so yeah, I feel like
the scary thing is when I think about it in that sense, is what you could end up having is like a mother competing against her child.
Yeah, you could.
Which, okay, it is what it is. But in my sort of like setup of it, yes, that could happen at any age type thing. But the way in which I look at it was there are the stepping stones of development. So OJAC for that bracket moving forward, and you've got your age categories within OJAC. Then when you get to your 18, you then move forward into the British Agility event, which is then the stepping stone forward for whatever you want to do.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good way to do it. So how did you become the YKC Team GB coach, and what made you want to take on this role? So was this your first year as the Team GB coach? Or have you done it for 2 years now? I can't remember.
We were employed or appointed, whatever way you want to look at it, before COVID.
Oh, okay.
So we had, I think we must have had nearly 2.5, 3 years where we were a management team, but we didn't actually manage a team, if that makes sense.
Oh, okay. I see. Yeah. No, I get what you mean.
So there was a lot of time where we were talking about what we were going to try and do and how we were going to do it, and then events being cancelled and everything that happened within the world. So Finland last year was our first team management where we actually had our sort of presence as a team at an event.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So this year is theoretically our second physical year.
Okay.
But we've been together as a management team for must be 4 years, 5 years, something like that. 4 years.
Okay, cool.
And just never managed to actually get anything done.
So how did you become that role then? How did it come about? Was it something you saw and was interested in and went forward, or were you asked to do it?
I'd seen the sort of like job application type thing come up, and I thought about it, and I was looking about where and what it could do fitting into my life and how my life could potentially help push that forward. And then with the appointment of Greg as the senior manager, and then obviously with that job he has the managerial role of the junior team as well.
Yeah.
And having worked with Greg in different training and sort of like events type things, we knew kind of how each other worked a little bit.
Okay. Yeah.
So I had a conversation with him and said, look, is this something that would be beneficial? And he said, in a sense, go forward, put your application in, see what it is. There was, at the time, they hadn't appointed either a senior or a junior coach. And he said that he'd heard that there was quite a few applicants come forward. So we discussed it and moved forward. And then I had the interview with the YKC team and the prestigious events team, and then got the job from there. In a way, the management team was kind of set in place, and now it's allowing us to be a little bit freer in what we're doing. So like recently, just this last weekend just gone, we've done our first Team GB training camp for the junior team, which was great. So we ended up having everybody on my venue for 2.5 days. We did different activities. So we went off site and did some activities on the local lake. So they were canoeing, craft building, all sorts of different things like that. So building a real strong relationship within the team, but also then spent time back here on site where we were training, working through different skills and preparation, and in a sense developing everything that we'd sort of learned from the previous year moving forward.
So what made you want to have that role then? Was it, like you said, you thought that your experience and your lifestyle would, be ideal for that role and help the juniors? Because I suppose it's ideal with you being in it from such a young age. You know exactly what it is like to be a junior in agility, and how to train a dog from being a junior. So
I think that's probably, obviously, when we had the interview and we spoke through everything, there was a lot of what would you do over the years to help develop stuff, and there was those questions within the interview. And I think knowing what I knew from when I first went to the championships in 2007, prior to that, then competing in YKC, seeing changes happen throughout the YKC, throughout the Kennel Club, then being lucky enough to be a young hander in the Team GB adult teams. And moving forward, I had quite a lot of experience across the whole board. So I think it kind of went in my favour in that. And then with my day-to-day job and everything, involvement in training and business development here on the site, I think it all kind of linked together quite well. And it was something that I felt I brought quite a lot to the table in the sense of experience, but also the training development as well.
How long, what was your last year when you were on the senior team? How many years were you actually competing on it for?
2004. I can't even remember now. Quite a long time, if I'm honest. 2014, I think, was my last Kennel Club team. Right. Yeah, it must have been. No, it wasn't 2014. It was 2019. Sorry. 2019. Yes, 2019 was my last membership with Protest, and then my first international cap was 2008.
Oh wow! Okay.
That was my first adult cap. But yeah, it's been kind of like a fairly big process. COVID really threw all the dates around for me. It seems like it's been ages away, and
you feel like you need to miss out like 2021 or something, don't you?
I know. I can't even remember when COVID was now. But yeah, I'm sure it was 2018, 2019 time. I was on the last EO team with Protest, and then I've kind of retired him now, and I'm in the process of bringing another dog along. So in the future, hopefully I'll be back on that team. But I've just been so busy with other commitments and stuff, and I lost the love of agility a little bit in the sense of the training and the actual competing side of things. So I took a step back a little bit, and still working with the GB team, but actually as a competitor, I just took a step back a little bit and kind of reassessed everything and really looked where I wanted my focus to be within the agility world or within the dog world. And with my business being sort of like an ever-growing kind of success with what we're trying to do here, it was something I kind of just knuckled down and channeled it into that, really. Having done it for so many years, it was kind of one of those things where I think it was a good time to take a break.
100%.
And by taking that break, actually, it's made me kind of want to get back into it a bit more now recently. I obviously, with the younger dog coming out and competing and doing a bit, and now seeing the success of the juniors and being involved in that Team GB adult process and seeing that, it's kind of given me that little bit of desire to maybe get out and train and potentially compete again.
Yeah. Well, I know exactly what you mean. It's something I spoke about recently, actually, you know, and I haven't even been doing it as long as you, but sort of when it's the only thing you do, like, you know, every weekend for most of your life, you know, you kind of get to the point where you do get not bored, but sort of a bit overwhelmed by it almost, if that makes sense. And it kind of does take not doing it for a little bit to sort of get that spark back, and especially when you're trying to when you're making it your career as well, so you've kind of turned your hobby into a job that you kind of need to do to earn money, or, you know, stuff like that, or, you know, you feel like you need to keep your reputation and stuff like that. There can be a bit of you know, pressure on that, definitely.
Yeah, and I think the thing is the sport has changed so much for the good, but also so much for the bad of potentially social media, kind of the excuse culture, the blame everybody else culture, instead of actually just going, okay, I can be held accountable for this dog not being great. It's not an excuse. The reason why this dog hasn't reached its full potential is because, one, I haven't trained it, two, I haven't got the facility to, or whatever, instead of blaming everybody else. And that's one thing I get very kind of wound up and frustrated by it, seeing social media posts about, oh, I would have won if I had to knock 3 jumps down. The idea is you knocked 3 jumps down, you weren't good enough.
Yeah, absolutely.
No one needs to read that. In my eyes, like, who cares?
What you mean. Yeah.
In your own sort of goals for your dog, that might be really successful, so great. But it's not like, oh, I would have won if I hadn't have missed an A-frame, missed the weave, and knocked a jump down.
It's like, well, that was the point. Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of like I would have been world champion if I'd have been on the team during COVID.
Yeah.
Like, it's just a good excuse,
not how it was,
right?
Yeah. Definitely. No, I know what you mean.
So in my eyes, I think social media has a lot to kind of answer for problems within the sport. And okay, everyone has an opinion and everyone has that ability to be able to do it. But I think people need to actually be held accountable for sometimes making their opinion a bit more of a dictatorship and making people believe their opinion when they don't actually believe it themselves.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean.
So that's probably me speaking out of turn a little bit on that side of it, but I think that was one of the reasons why I really lost the love for it. A lot of drama. I couldn't be bothered to go to the shows and listen to the drama of something that happened and all this stuff. And I was just 100%. Like, okay, cool. And it was easier for me just to take a back seat and channel my energy and focus and everything else into something different that was actually being really rewarding to me. With the business and seeing what I've developed and in my head, what my goal was and where I've actually kind of gone past where my goal was to what I want to do next. And I find that quite rewarding, but also a little bit addicting. So I'm quite addicted to work. So the thing is the situation is when something is met or I reach a goal, I push the goalpost wider. And I'm going again.
You want that feeling again.
I want to keep pushing to make what I can out of what I've got.
But no, I see what you mean with social media. You know, I think there's also a pressure on people, you know, with Agility Net and all this kind of stuff that goes on behind the scenes to sort of do well and good enough at shows to post and look good and stuff like that, which I think is, you know, it shouldn't be. It's a shame. Do you know what I mean? But it definitely adds to it, unfortunately.
Yeah, and obviously, like, when things go well, you promote yourself, whatever. I get that, and that's not the problem. It's when people use the culture of, oh, I must blame somebody else because I wasn't successful. Okay, or it's an event's fault for me not being as good as I could be, or whatever. And I think that's something, again, I might be speaking out of turn, but I actually think that's something that we use or we even think about before the problems happened. It's kind of along that phase of, okay, this is a difficult course. As soon as it goes wrong, I'm going to blame this person or this scenario
or the judge
because I wasn't able to do it. Or the judge. Exactly.
100%.
And I think that's something that's crept in and it's become maybe acceptable to behave and act in that way.
It kind of looks normal, doesn't it? Because everyone's doing it. Like, you read it everywhere.
And I think it's one of the things we speak about with the junior team a little bit is you don't need to communicate via social media. The results and the team bonding, the relationship is what we're trying to create. And yes, people are on social media, but you don't need to moan and create problems on that.
Yeah.
So,
But yeah, that was another thing I was going to ask was, are you still interested in going back on the team as a competitor, or would you rather just stay in the roles you are behind the scenes? But from what you said, it sounds like you do want to do that in the future. But I bet it's quite, you get like both sides of it almost. So you get the sort of behind the scenes experience as opposed to the competitors' experience, like, is it, how different is it? Is there one you prefer, or... are they both equally as enjoyable?
I think they're both equally enjoyable. I get quite sort of like as a competitor, I don't very often get nervous. I kind of thrive on that feeling of I have to do well.
Yeah.
Or I can't let the rest of the team down. That kind of butterflies in my stomach is what I miss massively about being a competitor.
Okay, interesting.
And actually, I felt that a little bit when we were coaching for the junior team in Finland last year, because we'd been on a journey with the kids for so long. We'd seen them actually build a relationship with each other, and that team connection and that desire to do well. So when we went out there was a massive roller coaster of emotions for everybody.
I suppose you get the nerves on behalf of them then as well.
Absolutely,
instead of just on yourself, you're nervous for someone else because
Yeah, and you know what it means to them because you've been in that situation yourself. Yeah. And also then we had parents there that had never been to an event before. Yeah. And you could look over to them on the side of the ring and they're kind of looking around to say, how am I supposed to behave? Yeah. Am I supposed to cry because they've done badly and I'm upset for them? Am I supposed to kind of support it?
Yeah.
You saw such a up and down effect. And I think that was something that I quite liked, that you could feel that little bit of sort of anxiety / nerve / everything for wanting to do well.
Yeah.
So there's two different sides of it. Do I miss standing on the start line with a dog? 100%.
Yeah.
But on a day-to-day show, to get you to that international team, I don't have that feeling.
Yes,
and that's where I took a step back.
Yeah.
So as I didn't compete and didn't enjoy the feeling of the competition, that was when I decided it was easier to back out a little bit.
Yeah.
But actually, I think it's easy to come back in and get that feeling again now that I've had a bit of time to think about what I want to do. And also with the coaching and seeing how it affects other people and potentially my experience from previous years, I hope one day I'll be back on a team.
Yeah. And I suppose with dogs as well, like you might have a gap between dogs, like you said you do at the moment. Like if you're going to keep doing it constantly, you kind of need like to overlap dogs and keep getting dogs and stuff like that, which can't always happen, if you're working a lot or whatever. So I think that also plays a factor, I suppose. But
yeah, and I think as a young handler, obviously, is whether your parents are going to allow you to have a dog.
Yes, yeah.
And then now it's along the lines of, I'm lucky enough that I can have a dog if I need to, when I want to, type thing.
Yeah.
But again, it's the time and the effort. We all know how much time and effort goes into the training. So if I'm sort of wrapped up in work and really focused on developing things, and I haven't got the time that I potentially put into previously, I'm never going to be as good as I used to be, if that makes sense. Or I'm never going to be as good as I want to be in my head.
Yeah, I get you.
So I think that's something that's come into the equation for me. And agility now, for so many people, you see at the top of the sport and they're winning week in, week out. It is their 24-hour job.
Yeah.
They are literally on the road competing, on the road training, doing this, doing that, fitness, conditioning, whatever. And you have to be 1,000% dedicated to it.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think that's the way it's changed. Definitely.
Yeah. But it's not always a bad thing. Like you said, you've experienced different, sides to it. And then, it's not like you have to stick at one forever, is it? Like you can do both, a bit of both, go back to it one day. Cool.
Yeah.
So I've lost where we are now. So what is the most rewarding part of being the YKC Team GB coach? I bet there's a lot of things that are quite rewarding.
Yeah, it's kind of, it's that sort of like roller coaster of emotion, okay, and seeing people be so nervous. Or I can remember one competitor sort of stood out last year. She was so nervous, she cried before she was about to run.
Oh no.
And I remember sort of just standing there saying, okay, well, why are you crying? You know you're good enough.
Yeah.
You've gone through all the training, you've got it.
Yeah.
Okay, think about what you're going to do now. And she sort of like composed herself, started thinking about what she's going to do. She went on the start line, she looked back and I went, all right, you got it. And she went, okay, I've got it. And she just said that to me, went in, she put in a clear round. And by the time she come out, I look, her mum and dad are both crying, and
Oh,
she's crying on the floor because that emotional kind of explosion, if
yeah,
that makes sense.
yeah,
So I think that side of it, that's really rewarding. But also seeing, in a sense, the development of not only the team, but also things that are now trickling back into the YKC.
okay,
And actually the qualification, what's going to be happening, hopefully going forward. New people coming into training roles, new people coming into the team, and actually seeing the growth of YKC on the up massively.
yeah,
and I think long term, I think it's only going to be beneficial for agility as a whole, but also long term, as these competitors get older, they're going to be on our national team.
yeah.
So if we can educate them now to move forward, I think Team GB in a few years' time is going to be even better than where we're at now.
Yeah. I suppose as well as a coach, you kind of think, oh yeah, you're coaching them to train their dog, you know, agility skills and stuff like that. But I suppose you're also a coach, sort of like the mental side of it, like you just said for the juniors, like you've got to coach them to not just do the agility, but to be in the right frame of mind to do the agility at those events and stuff. So there's more to it than just the physical dog training.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people do get very nervous and dealing with it, and sometimes, in a sense, having the correct person around you when you're nervous or you're worried about something or whatever is a massive aid or a benefit to doing well.
Yeah.
And I think actually every kid on the team last year had the confidence to come and speak to us if they were nervous, they wanted to ask us a question or whatever. And I think it definitely allowed them to relax more at the events.
Yeah, definitely.
And actually with this training camp here this time, we had that, okay, I think I'm going to do this, but I'm not quite sure. Do you think this is a good idea?
Yeah.
And they bounce those ideas off. So in a sense, we're a coach and we're a management team, but we also want them to feel comfortable to be able to come in and communicate with us.
Yeah, definitely.
And also bring in the parents as a unit as well.
Yes, yeah.
Because obviously the stress and the nervousness of the parents can bounce off into the children to the dogs to then the run.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's trying to push that forward.
Yeah. But like you can do all the training in the world and then go to a show and, you know, be in the wrong headspace and it all goes wrong just because you're in the wrong headspace. Like no matter what training you do, like that can happen. So that's definitely quite an important part of it, I suppose.
Yeah.
So how did you make it to the top of your game in agility? So by this, I'm assuming this person meant sort of Team GB, you know, winning medals, stuff like that. So how, it's a very broad question, but, you know, what kind of went into it for you to get there sort of on your journey of agility?
I can remember being, I don't know, must have been maybe 10 years old. And I remember kind of sat just thinking about where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do. And I wanted to try and create that desire of winning, but also the development coming forward in my day-to-day life, my communication, everything. And then I remember again sitting down at maybe 16, 17 and kind of like looked in the mirror and sort of thought, right, where do I want to be in a month's time? Yeah. Where do I want to be in 5 months' time? Where do I want to be in a year?
So a lot of goal setting.
In a sense, goal setting of where I wanted to be and pushing forward. But also, I think one of the biggest things that I think probably benefited me growing up and competing on teams and stuff is not really caring what people thought.
Yes, definitely.
And kind of being a little bit maybe self-absorbed a little bit when I was about to compete and going into this kind of like own little locked area.
Yeah.
People, if they tried to put you off and they tried to say something and talk to you about, oh, be careful of this and whatever, I would accept it if it was advice, but I would also be very clear that people might be trying to give me a little bit of a sort of EBT type thing and being like, okay, cool, thanks guys, but I'm just on this.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes you can be very easily influenced by factors that shouldn't really bother you. And I think actually by me, in a way, not caring about what people thought in that moment and actually trusting what I trained, trusting what I did, trusting what my coaches had said or people I'd been training with and worked with and the dedication to that event or whatever it was that I'd done, if I was training for World Team or EO, and dedicating my time and my training specifically to that. Yeah. And having very clear training plans in my head.
Yeah, definitely.
it was very obvious. I would walk into my office and on the whiteboard, for example, I would know what I was going to train.
Yeah.
And I know where and timeframes and all things like that. So it was very clear, but also blocking out all the rubbish that I didn't need to actually kind of consider, really.
Yeah. So did you sort of make your training plans from things you saw at shows that you or your dog struggled with? Is that how you sort of built your training plans?
Yeah, I have a core sort of process I always go through before any event, and I still do to now. When I say any event, I mean like anything that is like a world team or like a couple of years ago, WAO team and different things like that, where it kind of gets me in a bit of a routine. So there's 5 exercises that I do. And those 5 exercises test my dog on everything I feel you need to be able to get around a course.
Okay.
And all of my training plan could be relevant to the judges or the event or the carpet or whatever it is. But prior to the event, I go through these 5 exercises. And these 5 exercises are something that I don't think I'll ever change because they give me clarity on how and where I am with my dog.
Yeah, definitely.
So that tends to happen normally about 5 to 7 days before we travel to the event.
Okay.
So now I know exactly where we're at or where we are in our sort of like development, and that gives me a lot of feedback. But all of my training prior to that, my plans are all relevant to the event or the judges or the task in which is in hand. But those, for me, those 5 skills or those 5 drills that I do are a bit of like a tick chart, and I'm kind of like, I'm ready.
And I suppose that gives you confidence as well. So you go out there and you have more confidence because you think, well, I've done my 5 things. There's nothing more I could have done. And it probably, stop you sort of beating yourself up if it goes wrong because you think, well, I've done them. Like, there's nothing more I could have done anyway. Yeah. So I suppose that all helps you mentally too.
Yeah, and I feel with experience, it allows you to have that mental kind of clarification. But I also think it means that you know what you're able to achieve at that event.
Yeah, definitely.
And sometimes realistically, I think you have to, if people were more realistic with themselves, going out there and going, well, I know I'm not going to win an individual medal here, but I'm out there to win a gold medal in the team event.
Yes, yeah.
That is your focus.
Yeah.
And I remember being on the team with Greg and Lee Gibson a few years back, and our main aim was to medal in the team.
Yeah.
And all of our focus, all of our training, everything, we travelled to each other to train on a weekly basis, and everything was focused around that.
Yeah.
And again, the year after that, actually a couple of years after that, sorry, when Greg and the team won the gold medal, theirs was exactly the same. The connection and the bond and everything that they had was focused to winning that gold medal.
Yeah.
And for all of us, when we've been lucky enough to win medals in the team event, it's kind of been the situation of someone else has taken our medals away from us.
Oh, okay.
Because our prep should have been so good that you go there knowing in your head, if everything goes to plan, you are going to do well.
Oh, okay.
And the years where there may have been one mistake here or whatever, it felt more about the medals have been taken away from us, not us trying to achieve them.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's a good mindset.
That might kind of sound like a bit arrogant, but the focus and I think in any sport, when you get to a point where you are trying to really focus to do the best you can, you should be prepared enough that it feels like it's been taken away from you, not handed.
That's interesting. And another thing with like the not caring what other people think, like a lot of people probably get sort of, especially juniors, sort of stage fright, thinking, oh, this person and this person's watching me and stuff like that. And as well, I've had people before sort of try and sway my course walking choices, like after course walking, after I've made my mind up. And then I have made the mistake before of going in and doing that thing and it going wrong. And then thinking, well, I should have just stuck to what I originally did because I know what I can do with my dog. They don't. So that's another huge thing, is having enough confidence in yourself to just go through with it in your own head instead of, listening to all these outside sort of, I mean, obviously listen to them, but, being so swayed by other people, watching other people telling you things and stuff like that.
Yeah, I agree. I was once told when I played football that you listen to everybody, but you take advice from people that you respect in the sport.
Yeah, exactly.
So the thing is, if there's someone that potentially is just a good friend and you respect them as a friend, but they might not be a dog trainer, or they might not be a handler, or whatever. You listen to it, but you respect the advice of a coach or a trainer more than you do of a friend.
Yeah.
When it's relevant to a sport, more so.
Yeah, if my trainer, she knows me and my dog, so she probably would have advice that I would use. But yeah, this was just someone else, another competitor that didn't really know my situation, and I made the mistake of listening to them, but never again. So how often do you train your own dogs in agility? So obviously you said you've sort of taken a bit of a back seat doing that, and I assume you train a lot more, when you're actually, got goals in the sport than sort of when you're just focused on the work side of it.
Yeah, so if we speak sort of like historically with the dogs, when I was on teams and stuff, there was a lot more fitness, sort of conditioning, training and stuff in place. They would do something every day that was beneficial to agility.
Yep.
But it wasn't always equipment training or actually running courses or sequences. So on the site where I train and I work, we've got treadmills, hydrotherapy, we've got everything there, fitness-wise, physio, osteo, all on site.
All the
so the dogs are able
stuff.
to see those as well as then having the ability to go out and train.
Oh, okay.
So the dog that I'm currently working, she'll do probably 3 short training sessions. But these training sessions might last 10, 15 minutes. They're not anything drastic. I remember years back, I used to go to 3-hour sessions a week when I was competing onto my first EO team, and I would do 3 group sessions for an hour at a time, and then there would be sort of like bike work or treadmill or something else as well that the dogs would work in between. But even just I work in the sort of like a pet industry side of it as well with what the business does. So I'm quite strong in saying that training happens in a way 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
But it might not be relevant to the sport, but the basic manners and boundaries within the house or wherever do replicate behaviours that you're seeing in the competition ring. So I'm quite strong on that side of it. Actually going out and training my dog and drilling them over equipment or whatever, I don't do daily. Like I said, at the minute, 2 to 3 times a week, maybe. On the build up to an event, I'll be working on a lot more specifics, maybe some skills, the 5 exercises I spoke about, and working through there. But yeah, it varies and depending on what I've got in the pipeline.
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose like if you went on holiday or something, you might not do it for 2 weeks, and that's fine.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's no like strict routine of training. It's just flexible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So what is the proudest moment of your competitive agility career so far?
It's a tough one because there's as a junior, there's 2 that stand out. There's obviously winning the gold medal at the Junior World Championships was like a big deal for me.
Yeah.
And then obviously competing and running at Crufts and I think being the only handler at the moment to have won the Agility Dog of the Year 3 years on the trot.
Yeah,
but also then going back and winning it a 4th year with a different dog.
Yeah.
So that was kind of cool. So that meant a lot. But I think as a junior, it was probably that. As an adult, probably competing at the World Championships for the first time.
Yes, yeah.
I think that was kind of like an honour for me in a sense. It was for me running at the World Championships is like the top of the top.
Yeah.
That was good. Standing on a podium at any international event is cool, and there's no other feeling like it really. And I've been lucky enough to do it at WAO, EO, and World Championships. So I felt like that emotion at several events, which is really cool. But yeah, I think probably the proudest moment is going to be winning a medal or running at the World Championships, and then followed closely probably by winning the championship at Crufts.
Yes, yeah, definitely. What year was that in?
Oh God, I'm rubbish with dates. 20
roughly
13.
Oh, okay, cool.
I think something like that.
Yeah, so a while ago.
Yeah, a while ago. Yeah.
Cool. So back to, how you said that you went into that World Championship where you wanted to medal in team with Greg and Lee. So you said that your main focus for that event was winning the team medal. Were you also competing in the individual classes at the same event?
Yes, that year. Hang on a second. That year, that year we did.
Okay.
It was one of the years previously where we just went for team.
So did you still was one of your goals still to do well in the individual, or did you kind of think, oh, maybe my dog's not as fast, or, like when I went with Ethel to IMCA, obviously she's a steadier dog, so my focus was on team, which we did medal in team, but, I knew that I could get all clears in individual and still not medal because of the speed issue, so that wasn't my main focus. But so, if you had a dog that you knew could do both, would you go in thinking, okay, I want to medal in literally every single thing because I know I can? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And at the time, actually, the dogs in which we were running, it was Ruby, was mine. Greg had Detox, and then Lee had a dog called Scott. And at the time, they were probably 3 of the quickest dogs in the country, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So we were, because both myself and Greg and myself and Lee are a good sort of friendship group anyway, there was that maybe the relationship that we had, we wanted to stand on a podium as a team together. So it was slightly different in that sense.
That's why it was your main focus over individual.
Yeah, and I think because we were like, we've got the opportunity here to actually stand together on a podium, which is really cool. Mm-hmm. But we had the individual at the same time. And I honestly don't know, thinking back now, why we it was probably because of that, the friendship and the team coming together.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Of actually putting the pressure on us and getting out there and doing well in the team.
It kind of feel more special to do it with those people than on your own almost, I guess, And
it's one of those things, until you've probably run at an event like that, every run that you do, you want to do well in.
Yes.
Because you're 100%. There and there's the time, the investment, the emotion, everything else that's come in place. Yeah. All the goals and the road from start to finish. And the worst bit is getting in the car, on the way home, for the journey on the way home on the Monday morning. Yeah. And not having achieved or not having done as well as you'd have wished.
Yeah. 100%.
And especially if you're a long way away, sat there for maybe 2 days driving is a long time to reflect, and a time where you could kind of just sit there rocking, worrying that you've not done as well as you need to. Yeah. Or it's the other way. You're driving home, kind of celebrating, happy that you've got like a medal around your neck or whatever. It's until you've had that emotion, you can't really explain it because it's and we just try and explain that to the kids the other week. We were trying to say, until you get to the event, you won't realise how scary but happy it can be.
And I suppose you don't get sort of 2 chances at those big things. Like it happens once a year, and you might not even get on another year. Whereas like a normal show, well, there'll be another one next weekend, if that makes sense. So that's a big thing.
I think that's what adds additional pressure.
Yeah, 100%.
I think you're there going, I've got to make this team, I've got to do this, I've got to do that.
Which I suppose could ruin it for some people, as in they could crack under that.
Absolutely. And I think that's where it then creates additional pressure, and that's where the not caring what other people think, the correct sort of brain thought process or the headspace, and then also how good your training plan is coming into it helps you go in knowing you're prepared.
Yeah. Have you always sort of worked well under pressure then, or is that something you've had to work on? Because for me, like, especially, nearer the start of my, competitive sort of career, nerves would sort of get the better of me and scramble my brain a little bit. So is that something that you had to work on, or are you kind of just like that?
I think I've been lucky enough that from an early age I was in quite competitive sport. Oh, okay. So I played quite high level football. I played quite high level sort of like sports at school and run for the county and did all sorts of different things like that. Oh, okay. So I was lucky enough to probably be under different competitive pressures from a young age.
So you kind of got used to it, I suppose.
Yeah, so I kind of got used to that whole, you just got a job to do, you either deliver or you don't.
Yeah.
And there's no in between. It's not like, I was 50% on, 50% off.
Yes, true.
Do you know what I mean? It was kind of like you either get out there and hit it or you fail.
Yeah.
And I think that's where not caring sometimes helps you a bit, because you're like, well, I'm going in for this. This is my job today. Yeah. My job is to stand on a podium, or my job is to do this. If it goes wrong, it's hard to take on the chin, but you know that you've gone in there with everything correct, and you do what you can.
Yeah. Do you reckon that like the younger you were, the more sort of those big successes meant to you, if you get what I mean? Or, you know, do things still mean as much to you now? You've been doing it for so long as they did sort of when you were that, 10-year-old junior, sort of winning things for the first time? Because obviously now, like, especially after I have competed abroad, like the wins at the smaller shows, like when I was 10 or whatever, it was like I'd won, like the biggest thing I could win. Whereas now, you know, little wins are still good, but knowing the end goal is something so much bigger, it's not quite the same. Is that something that you kind of have experienced?
Yeah, I think you're definitely kind of correct with the size of the show and the event.
Yeah.
I like there's nothing like running at Olympia. There's nothing like the pressure of potentially getting to the singles final, the champ final at Crufts.
Yeah.
Running under pressure at EO, WAO, AWC. Again, they're probably in the top 5 of things. But I always used to be, I remember trying to get to grade 7 with my first dog. And I remember having something stupid, like you needed 4 wins to get into grade 7, which at the time was called advanced. And you needed 4 wins to jump into agility. And I needed 1 more jumping win. And I had 26 second places in that process.
Oh, wow.
And I remember then when I got that final win, I remember it being like I'd won the World Cup in my head. I was like, oh, I'm finally here.
Yeah.
So it meant that I could then compete in champ.
Yeah.
So that meant a lot. But like now, for me, getting to grade 7 is not really a priority.
No, yeah.
Because obviously you can get to Crufts, you can get to Olympia now with like slightly lower grades and stuff. So you're still running there. But obviously winning the highest level is obviously great.
Yeah.
But I think that the desire to get to an agility champion for me isn't a big goal of mine.
Okay. Yeah.
Whereas before it was, I've done it with one dog in a sense. I was like, okay, I've done it once, tick.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then I kind of think, well, okay, now what can I do?
Yeah.
Now what can I do? So moving, obviously, I'm not taking the value of an agility championship away. And if I have the opportunity and I've got a dog good enough, I would push for it. But what I'm saying is that whole process is not like a massive goal of mine.
Yeah.
To be agility champion.
I suppose success is relative to, you know, everyone.
Absolutely.
So.
Yeah, someone, for example, might be going from grade 1 to grade 3. That might be their champ.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
So it's relative to what it is. So for me, trying to run at Crufts, trying to run at Olympia, trying to run at WAO, EO, and AWC are like 5 goals for me.
Yeah.
All right, and those things are things that I'll always focus towards. Whether that is I have to be in grade 7 to compete in the CC at Crufts, or whether I am just in the singles because I can do it at 5, 6, 7, whatever it is, allows me to get there. So as long as I'm running out there, it's basically depending on where your main focus is.
Yeah, no, 100%. So do you have any upcoming plans for BAC, OJAC and YKC Team GB?
So we're going to continue with the YKC Team GB camp going forward. It was a big success from what we've done, so we're going to be pushing that forward in the future to try and kind of further develop the education and stuff on that. So that's something that's definitely going to stick.
Cool.
For BAC this year, we've got some new sponsors and some new sort of exciting things that are going to be happening across the whole event. Hopefully within the next week to 10 days, they'll be announced. There's obviously one of the things that is going to be now, it's one of the win-on spots for the WAO team.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That will take part at the event, so that adds a little bit of sort of like prestige to it.
Yeah, that's exciting.
And with OJAC, there is the option now, which some of that is moving towards BAC as well. The win-on spot for the junior England spot is happening at BAC.
Oh, okay.
And we've got a couple of ideas in the pipeline for next year's OJAC. Yeah, so it's all kind of in a big planning stage. BAC has, British Championships for this year is taking place in November, and that is all set and ready to go. Entries and judge announcements and stuff are all coming with new sponsor announcements as well. So that's all exciting. We've got the main sponsors are all still here. We've got everything there, but we've just got some sort of developmental processes in place.
Yeah, just
so
building
yeah, it's
on
all
it.
it's all in the pipeline, ready to come out hopefully within the next sort of 10 days.
Cool. Everyone will be looking out for that then.
Hopefully.
So, what is your best piece of advice for juniors when it comes to handling competition nerves? Quite a few people ask this same question, actually, juniors.
Okay. I think if the preparation's correct, okay, and you know what you've got, is actually running through and sort of like visualizing what the run is going to look like and how it's going to be, and also then just not worrying about what's happening around you.
Yeah.
Kind of closing yourself off a little bit, okay, and not having people that might influence you in a good or bad way keep chipping away at you. Okay, at that moment, 2 or 3 dogs before you run, you need to be focused on the task in hand. And I think sometimes you've got a dog ahead of you and a parent or a coach or a friend says, oh, be careful, too many dogs have done this or whatever.
Yeah.
That adds to the pressure.
Yeah, my mum has done that before.
Myself, I go into like a bit of a lockdown in my own head, sort of 3 or 4 dogs before, and it's zone out, you've got a job to do now.
Yeah.
So actually knowing and having a set routine in your head as to what you're going to do, so you know you're prepared.
Yeah.
Whether that's off the field, whether that's on the start line or whatever. Okay, knowing what it is you're trying to achieve and how you're going to get there.
Yeah.
It's when you get to those big events, it's not so much about okay, we're here, let's have a great time and let's hope it goes well. You're there, you're going to have a great time, but you also know how much effort you've put in.
Yeah.
And people say, it's about taking part, but at that moment, it's never about taking part. You want to do well. So the thing is, it's knowing how much time, effort, money, whatever it is you've put in place, whether we fail or not. I've already said that. That's kind of one of those things. It's like 50-50, but you have to be able to know when you stand on the start line, that moment you're prepared.
Yeah. And I suppose, like I said earlier, knowing that you've done everything you can should help reduce the nerves, because it'll mean you have more confidence in what you've done.
Yeah.
And think, well, even if it does go wrong, obviously you don't want it to, but it shouldn't, because there's no reason for it to, really.
Yeah, and I think the biggest sort of like feedback I've always had is on that drive home or wherever it is look at yourself and kind of go, okay, where am I going to be in a month?
Yeah.
Where am I going to be in 5 months? And working a plan forward from there, because that can be the hardest time, knowing you've come away from an event and you haven't done as well as you have.
And you can lose your motivation.
You can affect the next 6 months of competition or training or whatever it is.
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose all those things do take practice as well. So like juniors can practice these things at sort of the smaller shows again leading up to instead of just going straight in at the like tryouts or whatever, practicing getting that sorted out at the little shows.
It should be a routine that happens nearly on every run. So the dog and you and everything happens in a consistent format moving forward.
Yeah.
So when you get to that big event, nothing really changes.
Yeah. For me, it's like the warm-up routine. So not only am I warming myself and my dog up, but, I'm in my head as I'm doing that, if that makes sense. So that kind of is all part, and it's like 10 minutes before the run.
Yeah.
So it's not even a long time, but it definitely helps get you in the zone. And I suppose it's juniors that have asked it, but I suppose adults, it can be exactly the same. Like, I'm sure there's a lot of adults that get really nervous as well. So I
actually sometimes think that adults get more nervous.
Yeah.
I actually think because in a sense, it's their money they're spending.
Yeah.
Like with the parent, with the kids, it's like, mum paid for that. Don't worry.
Yeah. And it's sort of more just for, like, everything's just more for fun for kids, almost, isn't it? Especially, like, the younger you go, the more. But, like, I think kids are better at sort of just doing things for enjoyment, whereas adults are like, oh, yeah, got to win this because of this or whatever. So, 100% for adults as well. So, more advice. What is your best piece of advice for those who unsuccessfully tried out for YKC Team GB 2023 and want to try out again next year, trying to make the next team? So, if they tried out, didn't get on, but would like to do it again, what is your main piece of advice for sort of coming back from that?
I would say, again, this is what I would personally be looking to do myself, is be fairly brutal about why you weren't successful.
Yeah.
Okay, so take all the results, all the stats in which you've got from however many runs you've done or whatever, and look at where you might have failed. Okay, what was good, what was bad, but also what was the common factor across it all.
Yeah.
Okay, so say, for example, you weren't picked because you had 3 jumps down every 2 rounds.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
what can you do to help that? Or is my dog training good enough because my weave entries weren't good enough?
Yeah.
And actually be fairly brutal and blunt about what was good, what was bad, what was ugly.
Yeah.
And then build your training plan. Okay, I can keep building confidence here because this was really good. This was terrible. I really need to go back to the drawing board and really work out what it is. This was okay. I got through it in some runs, but not the other. But I didn't feel confident.
Yeah.
And not feeling confident about this caused the problem with this fault happening.
Yeah.
You see, so you can break things down into like a much cleaner format and then analyze that, and get out on the training field and work it. And next time you're going to be prepared. You're going to be ready. You go again. If you don't succeed, you do the same process.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is you kind of, if you take a hit, you get back up and you go again and you focus on it and you get ready. And keep always setting your goals where you know where you're going.
Yeah.
So you've got something you're working towards all the time. Don't get to the end of the tryouts and go, oh, I've got nothing now.
It's back to that sort of... It's back to that sort of as well, not making excuses for why you didn't make it. I think Greg said at last year's tryouts, you know, if you didn't make the team, ask yourself why you didn't make the team. Do you know what I mean? And like exactly if you make excuses, then you're not going to improve for next year. So you're probably going to go into next year with just the same performance as the year before, and then not get again and have the same excuses. So
yeah, absolutely agree. So yeah, the more analysis you can do after your performance, the better it's going to be.
Yeah. Do you find filming? Because I get all my runs filmed where I can. Obviously, usually my groom does it, but if I don't have a groom, I ask a random person because I find it really helpful to sort of look back and not just watch my dog, but watch my handling. And often I'll come out of a run thinking, oh, I wonder why my dog did that. Watch the video and see where my hand was, or you know, which way I was facing. Think, oh, that's why. So, you know, do you use that and think, you know, do you recommend people do that?
Definitely. Like at the tryouts and stuff this year, we had the live stream guys, Four-Legged Flip from the US. They filmed everybody. Not only was that good for us as a management team, if we wanted to go back and review maybe a run or see, I don't know, if a dog did have a fault here or whatever, if the judge needed it, but also then people can go back and purchase their runs.
Yeah,
okay? And the thing is the filming's always good quality. Okay, you get the camera angle that is good.
And it sees everything, isn't it?
Easy to be able to go back and analyse that.
Yeah.
And I think actually it's something that in this country we don't utilise well enough.
Yes,
so when there is an event with live stream and video on demand or whatever you want, I think it's something that we should be using more, because I think long term is going to help us educate and develop.
Yeah. Do you, as a sort of management team, do you look back on people's videos often when making decisions about who to take on the team, or is it only in certain people's runs where you're not quite sure what happened? Or
yeah, what we tend to do, I wouldn't say we look back often. If there's something that we weren't sure of, or like even if a judge in a situation goes, can I review this, please? I think I've called this and I don't need to. Can I have a look at it? Then we can look at that. But also, Tina, that is our sort of like statistician, she is so sharp in recording where faults were, what happened, times, everything.
Okay.
If we ever need anything, we go to her first. And then in a sense, the last resort would be go back and looking at videos if we needed to. Like the job that Tina does kind of behind the scenes, just sat there behind her laptop, keeping all of this, we can go, okay, this competitor, how many clear rounds across the process? She goes, 7.
Yeah.
And she's like, it's immaculate.
Yeah.
And it helps us make so many good decisions. And I think actually it makes us be consistent with clarifying maybe picks or results or whatever it needs to be.
Yeah.
We've got data there to actually back us up.
And I suppose there's so many like stone cold facts there that like people can't turn around and be like, oh, it's biased or it's unfair. Because it is like, and especially agility, it's like faults times, that's the stats. Like there's no opinion as such. Well, obviously there's always going to be some, but it is mainly all on data and stats and, you know, just facts. So
yeah, when we look at sort of like how quick a dog was, maybe if we're looking at meters per second or something, and there might be a decision where someone's turned left on a jump versus turning right, we can always go back and go, this person was 0.3 faster, why?
Yeah.
That might be a decision that they made on certain jumps. So we've got the option to go back and look at it.
Yeah.
So that allows us to utilise data a bit better as well.
So the last question is, what is your best piece of advice for YKC members wanting to make a career for themselves in agility? So this is more not even the competitive side of it, just wanting to have a career in the world of agility, I suppose? Again, quite a broad question.
Yeah, I think probably the best thing, what I would say, is gain experience first.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so actually be at the events.
Yeah.
Okay, go out, train, compete, put yourself under that pressure, know what it feels like to be at a specific event. And then, in a sense, know what you're trying to achieve from that business.
Yeah.
Okay, everyone, it sounds really kind of brutal, but at certain points, everyone had equipment in their garden, and there was several places where you could drive down a country road, and if you look in fields, you would see equipment sort of like sporadically spread everywhere. And the thing is anyone can make a quick pound from doing agility, but it's 100%. Whether it's actually sustainable. Does that make sense? And there's so many people out there that want to do it, but the reason why certain businesses, companies, trainers, whatever, have been successful is they've done a proper business plan through it.
Yeah.
Okay, so the idea is knowing what, and also agility isn't just about jumps and tunnels and everything else. It's the dog training alongside it.
Yeah, definitely.
And to be able to get the basics that a lot of people fail at, the basic start line stay, basic control and focus. If you are a trainer that installs all of that, your students will become more successful.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so all of that factor is know that agility isn't just about jumps and tunnels and running around. It's all about the dog training side of it as well.
Yeah.
So I think if you are a new handler or a young handler looking to maybe get into it, is know the dog training side, know the agility side, and what bridges the gap between the two.
Yeah.
And I actually think bridging the gap between the two is experience, if I'm deadly honest.
Yeah. And like you said, definitely being an actual competitor first, I think, is quite helpful, because you then know exactly what it's like.
Yep, agree.
And totally agree. I guess being a trainer isn't the only thing you can do. Like, you know, you've gone on to do your own shows. You know, people judge a lot, you know, go abroad and judge. Yep. So, you know, there's sort of a wider scope to making a career in agility than just the training side of it, I suppose.
Yeah, there's the sport, if we can call it a sport, is growing in so many different areas now.
Yes.
The online platforms, the judging, the traveling, the event organization, the logistics side of it, okay, equipment, all of that. There's so many different factors within it. So it's knowing really what you want to do and taking the time to sit down. Don't jump into sort of ideas and decisions. Sit down and think about it. It's a planning process, and the way the world and the sport is going, everything's happening so quickly.
Yeah,
I think it needs to be actually developed and pushed forward in the correct manner, instead of it just being, I'm a trainer now, I've got equipment, I've got the greatest venue, but I've got no clients.
Yeah, I suppose you have to be a business person, not just a trainer.
Yeah, and I think that's where successful trainers move on, is they have a bit of business back into them as well, because the thing is actually on a business side of things, if your students are doing well, your business will increase.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that you might have 100 clients through the door a week, but if none of them do well, over a while they'll get bored, because they'll go somewhere else and look for
progress,
additional skills or progress or results. So it's maintaining progression throughout. And like we said earlier, the smallest of goals and progression are the biggest things for some people.
And speaking of agility being a sport or not being a sport, do you think it's sort of getting more towards being considered a sport by people? Or, you know, do you think that's something that will happen? Or, you know, will it get bigger to that point? Because obviously it is always getting bigger. And
yeah, I think long term there could be some changes again, but I know that there's been meetings in the Kennel Club and different organisations and stuff have been to the sports leadership board and actually put it forward to progress it. And the reasons why it hasn't become a sport are very clear and very obvious to people that actually sit down and think about it.
Yeah.
Do I think it will change? I hope so. Do I think it will? No.
Okay.
I don't think it will ever be recognised in that sense.
Yeah.
There is a certain area I think will become I don't know whether you call it like a grassroots sport.
Yeah.
But do I ever think we'll see it at the Olympics? No.
No.
And I think there's so many factors that could potentially change to maybe help that, but I just don't think the sport, the community would be accepting of that.
Yeah, yeah. Do you judge as well, quickly?
I do, yeah.
You do judge, yeah. I can't ever remember seeing you judge, but yeah, I was just something in the back of my mind. I was like, I actually don't know.
Yeah, I haven't done loads and loads, but I normally do probably 2 or 3 a year.
Okay. Do you a champ judge or just like the normal sort of show?
No. I've judged abroad at different events and stuff, but just with everything, I haven't really had the time to do all my sort of hours of judging and
yes, that's true.
It's probably something I'll look to do in the future.
Yeah. Suppose there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
Right. Well, that is all the questions. Thank you very much.
No worries.
So that was my conversation with Ant. I hope you all enjoyed it. I found that super interesting. We really went off on some great tangents there and delved right into everything that we were talking about. So as always, you know the drill. Go follow me on all the social media. I'll put it here on the YouTube video and down below on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And as per, I would really appreciate it if you could leave the podcast a rating or a review, hopefully 5 stars if you're enjoying it. But thank you so much to everyone for listening as usual, and I will see you next Wednesday at 8 p.m. for another guest episode. Bye guys.